Choo choo, ladies and gentlemen, and my goodness, it is great to have all of you back on board. And as you can currently see, it's been a little bit of a change. There's been a few new things that have come on board. The fact that we have moved into digs, ladies and gentlemen. We are now in the Locale Archive Station's primal carriage, and as you can see, it's garnered with the odd bragging about insurance companies and about a pond festival, basically the snide edition of Gardener's Question Time. And as you can see here, ladies and gentlemen, we have returned to the quickie. So, let's get this store on the road, shall we? Now, first off, we've got a little bit of housekeeping to do, because it is currently December 2023, and it has been 6 days since Chris was last spotted in public, and we highly against advising seeking out Chris in any way possible, and I do adhere to this as well. Don't go seeking for Chris. You're not gonna. You might just find him, and you don't want that either. However, then we move down to the begging counter, and they come up with a very big disclaimer right here saying, "Do not donate or to buy anything from Chris. He lies about needing money and habitually neglects his customers and supports, and worse. It has been 36 days since Chris last begged for money, and remember the record streak was something close to about 875 days. And considering that this was during the period when Chris was in jail, that speaks volumes about, well, not so much needing money, but just the fact that there was no way of actually him being able to beg for it. It has also been 100 days since Chris last uploaded pages to meet his formerly paid obligations to the Sonichu comic, and the previous record streak was 1,520 days. That's... What is that? What is that? Is that like over 10 years? Something like that? Well, no, that can't be true. It's got to be at least like, I'm going to say roughly just under 5 years since Chris did that. So it means that any money you've ever been donating to him over Patreon before mid-2021, he's just been pocketing. And it has also been 5,180 days since Chris last applied for a job. And that is a record that is still going strong. And if you want an estimation of when that was, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of people speculate it to be around September of 2009 was the last time Chris applied for a job. That's pretty bad. And by the way, just in case you're wondering here as well, this is a store from what used to be Chris's Etsy store. Added a comment to your case. An Etsy customer gambled that Chris would deliver and lost. Still bitter about it over 3 years. So, yeah, just take that what you will. I know that, again, YouTubers like Gibby will point to these sorts of things as well, but this is for your benefit in any case. So, as well as going over Chris's Twitter account each week, we're going to do a refresher on a lot of Chris's history, a lot about who he is, and how he's changed over the years. And this is something we suddenly like to do for a lot of other of our locales here on this platform, because people need to know exactly what we're dealing with, and more importantly, you have got to know exactly what it is you're getting into if you feel like supporting any of these guys, from Boogie to Chris Chan to DSP to Wings of Redemption. You've just got to know exactly what you're getting yourself into. So let's begin with the main man himself, Sonichu. And by the way, this is your tax dollars at work. The contents of this page have been bought with taxpayer money. Well, more specifically, American dollar tax money. I'm fortunate enough never to have even given Chris so much the inkling of a single red cent towards his comics, and I will continue to this day. By the way, this article might be also out of date, but whatever Chris else decides to add is a good question, since Chris technically is still working on the comics as we speak, but to what capacity, to what end, we are not entirely sure, so make sure to stick around for this sort of thing. Now, here is the very badly Crayola washable magic marker banner for Sonichu, and it's probably seen better days if you ask me. And by the way, Here is the official pictures from issues 0 all the way up to 7. And you can see the fact that, well, they do get a little bit busier over time, but it is also easy to see how it's kind of almost tragic at the fact that, yeah, they're contained full of things that probably shouldn't really go towards the cover of a comic. But who knows, ladies and gentlemen, it's also a little bit strange, the fact that, again, when we look at these sorts of things, let's just go back here, is that considering these were released roughly about either 2000 or perhaps even 2004, I think, is when issue 0 was released, you're also having to take into account just how much the stories have changed involving Chris's love quest, and how we still probably might never know until when the expiry date for this. Though, remember, if we'll have to go into this sometime, and if it feels like I'm just about to sneeze, the problem is that I actually had to wipe off a bit of dust from my from this arm extender here, because it's been like a good year and a half since I last had to dig this out for these videos, as well as my blue snowball mic. So here it is. So here is what we just need to know right now. And this is a direct quote from Chris. "This is no parody. This is a man's life, his failures, his nuances, his fantasies, his warped worldview proudly displayed for the world on paper and pixels. Reading Sonichu and learning about its author is nothing less than a descent into someone's personal hell, made at the more terrible for the fact that the author intends for the experience to entertain people, that they would purchase it. There is no joy, no fun in Quickfill. There is only a layer upon layer of horror." A now deleted So Bad It's Horrible entry from the TV Tropes article aptly describing the experience of reading Sonichu. And that was somebody who might possibly have got paid to review this. Goodness knows what would happen if someone paid me to review Sonichu, but we'll get to that. Now, what is Sonichu technically? Sonichu is Chris's official life work, magnum opus, and largest contribution to society and culture. To most, however, it is a poorly drawn and written comic book series about the adventures and travels that befall a fictionalized version of himself and his imaginary friends. Despite starting out as a comic about the titular character, it quickly turned into a wish-fulfillment outlet for Chris and his depraved fantasies, with Sonichu being a main character in name only, playing only second fiddle to Chris's primary Mary Sue self-insert. Other characters include Rose Chew and Chris's many other self-inserts. Yeah, first, one of the big things you're gonna have to, recognize immediately is that Sonichu is not really the character that we're supposed to follow. It's about, well, it's Chris. Chris is sort of like the person that he designed himself to be modeled after and to be followed through. It's absolutely got nothing to do with Sonichu. Yeah. Now, the comic began on the 24th of November 2004 and updated intermittently throughout the next 15 years, with its last significant update published on the 27th of June 2019. Chris wanted the series to last anywhere between 75 and 100 issues, although he was in no hurry to accomplish such feat due to multiple extended hiatuses, as well as the fact that Chris, had to move a doghouse that nearly weighed 10 tons, according to him, and his boyfriend, his love quest bollocks. After spending nearly 2 years not having to think about talking about Chris Chan ever again, it's surprising me the fact that I have to remind myself as to all of the wacky nuances and references I have to put upon myself because of this story, if you will. Although he was in no hurry following his extended hiatuses. Okay. Following Chris's incest charges, it seems unlikely that Chris will ever finish the series. Though, for the sake of all those listening or fortunate enough to have only ever heard of Sonichu in name only, this probably might be for the best. So, let's get started, interestingly enough, with the beginning. So the introduction is that Chris first drew Sonichu in March of 2000. Though, again, this is more specific to the line of Sonichu. There was some speculation about technically if this is the first OC Chris had created, because a lot of people, including Chris himself, it derives from an orange basketball playing Sonichu that he made some point when he was like coaching a basketball team at his Manchester high school class. Although what's also likelier still was the fact that it was just an inspiration, and then Sonichu probably came into fruition. So he drew Sonichu only for the fact being told that he could not use a copyrighted character on a class project, so he instead came up with a true and original character plagiarizing from two of his favorite video games, Sonic the Hedgehog and Pokemon. Later, Chris would put his web programming skills to task and come up with Quick's Sonichu site, which showcased his various illustrations of his pride and joy. Over time, Chris would draw new characters in his own little universe that were more blatant rip-offs of the source material that he was inspired by, such as Rosechu, which is meant to be just a rip-off of Amy Rose from Sonic, and Blake, basically the rip-off of Shadow the Hedgehog from the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. And so Chris began to put together a couple of simple single-page or two-page narratives for his growing cast of characters. For a while, many of these comics were actually focused on the adventures of these characters, with no real references to the outside world. However, over time, he would start to put himself into these comic strips. Dissatisfaction with his own life led Chris to use the comic as a coping mechanism to achieve a sense of wish fulfillment. Since he was coming up with his story and nothing less, we'll get to that later, he could team up with his original creations and make things right in his idealized fantasy world. Inadvertent shattering of his heart from Sarah Hammer, along with the expulsion from English class with the confrontational with Mary Lee Walsh, provided the impetuous for Christian to kickstart the comic series in full force, turning real-life figures that he encountered into citizens and villains for him and his OCs to interact with. The series initially served as a complement to his love quest, as a feeble attempt to link an accomplishment or boost his own self-worth to unsuspecting prey. After all, Sonichu is zapping it to the extreme. He is Christian Weston Chandler's only son, and the first way past cooler Electric Hedgehog Pokemon. Considering what Chris would inevitably do to his own son, I'm going to say that with a hint of, a bit of an asterisk right there. It gets really complicated, unfortunately. The comics series was originally hosted on the various incarnations of Christian's homepage, as seen in the Wikipedia archive. In 2013, he began to upload the comics as albums on his Facebook page, and he affirmed in 2015, when he picked up the comic again, that this would be the place to find new pages. In September of 2015, he finally began to sell printed and autographed issues on Etsy and Lulu.com. The comic was originally promoted from now defunct Sonichu business cards, and he has since graduated to flyers. Ooh. Each new addition to the series proudly sports a "to be continued" disclaimer page. In fact, the comics are not updated with any regular frequency. In the 20 years since the character's creation, Chris has only completed 15 issues, even though he has zero responsibilities and unlimited free time. Chris has claimed that in total, he plans to complete 50 to 100 issues in his lifetime, meaning that he's only 15 to 30% of the way there. And considering Chris at the time of recording is approximately, what was it? 43? No, he's at this date he's 41 years of age. So yeah, make it for me, ladies and gentlemen. If Chris, for example, reached the age of, let's say, 80, then he would only get up to issue 28 or 29 at the very most, at his rate of progress. Possibly he might never reach issue 20, who knows. Reader's Guide to Sonichu. My art speaks for me, claims Chris. How to and overview. To start off, the comics don't appear to have a consistent numbering system in place. This can make it tricky to organize them. For example, the Sonichu series began with issue 0 instead of 1. Chris also decided to assign one of the books as issue 12-9 to avoid associating with Pony OC Nightstar with the number 13. The book itself was originally going to be issue 13, with Planet Dolan as the subject matter instead. Despite that, there was an actual issue 13, but only for a bunch of vaguely connected ideas brainwashed into Chris by the idea guys, with no actual narrative in sight. The numbering of every subsequent comic book continues from there. Adding to the confusion are the specials, which were numbered separately from the main comics. Adding to the confusing numbering system, Chris uses a bunch of television lingo when referring to his stories. Each issue up to issue 12-9 contained multiple separately numbered episodes and sub-episodes. Due to the incoherent narrative structure of the stories, along with their inconsistent numbering system, readers often lost track of which story happened in which issue. That would literally, that for any TV show, that would make things like, like a narrative or a continuity an absolute nightmare. Unless the only real way some people could get their hands around this if Sonichu was modeled on the lines of, let's say, a sitcom, or in fact not even a sitcom but like a serialized soap opera. That would be the only way to make sense out of any of this if you do want any of this to make any sense. And then, of course, and it's not even as though it's better in the real world as now, because as of the point of writing, that Marvel decided to retcon Nightcrawler's origin story, so he's the biological son of lesbian couple Mystique and Destiny. How exactly any of that makes sense, I do not know. Nightcrawler being the son of Raven, however, is not exactly out of the range of possibility, but why exactly, how on earth are you going to get your head around Nightcrawler being the biological son of two women is a step too far. Even for X-Men, even for Marvel. Yeah, so I'm saying that at least Chris is not nearly as bad as that, but, well, that it gets worse. As far as, as a comic creator goes. Anyways. Due to the incoherent narrative structure of the stories, along with their inconsistent numbering system, readers often lost track of which story happened in which issue. For example, Black Sonichu, now known as Blake, was introduced in episode 4, which was the 5th story in the overall series and the first story in Sonichu issue 1. So, okay, so from getting my head around this, okay, so Blake it appeared in was the 5th story. So let's say if the first issue 0 had like 3 episodes and like 1 mini episode or like a special, and then Sonichu, and this was the 5th story, so that would be the first story of issue. So it's not 100% too difficult to get your head around it, and the only thing I could like possibly compare this in my mind is the likes of, let's say, almost how a manga would probably, rationalize some of this, because there are some mangas out there that do have little mini stories that aren't supposed to be connected narratively to the events of the main story. But unfortunately, this could have been sorted if Chris had just labeled these things as chapters, or even said that the original first issue of Sonichu was issue 1 instead of issue 0. Anyways, which was in turn the second comic. Further confounding matters were the sub-episodes about Chris's love quest, which appeared in issues 0 to 4, and again were numbered separately from the main stories. So, yeah, even though that is the case, I don't necessarily believe it's the hardest thing to get your head around. The only possible way to get your head around this for any new timecomers is, well, pick up an issue and you can sort of see what Chris. And here's an interesting thing: is that yes, even though there are many issues with this inherent system, it's not absolutely without going outside the realm of possibility. You can sort of garner what Chris was sort of trying to go for. Not saying it with any success, but you can suspend your realm of disbelief if you do want to make any of this work. So, there we go. Because otherwise, what would be the point? Issues 0 to 1 and featured Sonichu as the unchallenged star of the series, with Chris as a supporting character also appearing in the backup strips. By issue 2, the comic had abruptly transitioned to Chris encountering people from his real life in shitty anime battles. Token attempts to tell Sonichu's stories and introduce Sonichu's spin-off characters were made in issue 3, but all pretense was dropped in issues 4 to 7, as the series became a vehicle for Chris as the leader of a heroic band of recolors to battle against a college dean, a group of ineffectual security guards, store managers, and later on, internet trolls and other people who made fun of the comic. And if we are just going to go very quickly into what qualifies as other people, Alec Benson Leary is like the first one right there, and that's... Is that literally the only person we're talking about? But yeah, I'm pretty sure Benson... And just so you guys are aware right now, I must say that actually, by the time we come to like talking about all of Chris's trolls, I do want to say I actually think that for me, Alec Benson Leary is my personal favorite, which I know people will say that, what's it called? Liquid Chris was probably the best because he absolutely got Chris so he got so badly under Chris's skin that it forced a whole load of things, which I won't spoil here for any first time viewers. So let's go. Originally, it was mostly innocent and harmless, being the byproduct of a simple man with a childish imagination, until it became an outlet to call out trolls, explore his depraved sexual desires, and live out his violent revenge-filled fantasies. The comic series was presented as if it were a cartoon or anime, which might explain why the comics mimic visual effects that work in an audio-visual context, but fail on paper, and was encapsulated into seasons with various episodes or series for our European friends. Hello. Sonichu issue 10 was intended to wrap up the first season of Sonichu. This opened a can of worms as to the current vision of the comics. Was Sonichu intended to be the hit action-adventure soap opera TV show that is broadcast in Quickville, or was it the historical documentation of Chris's and Sonichu's life and times? Perhaps it was destined to be the gospel for the stay-at-home autistic virgin male, hallowed be his name. Either way, it remained unanswered whether Chris continues on with the series because he has a vain, misguided belief that some true and honest soul would consider these as storyboards for proper licensing and production. I don't think any of that is going to happen because, to be honest, well, Chris, it passes off more as concept art than it would for, any, final product. Art imitating life. Sensing some criticism from the self-centeredness of his work, Chris wrote himself out of the series toward the end of Sonichu 7, trapping the Chris character in the time void so that the storyline could focus on other characters. Despite this, Sonichu still served as a strong Mary Sue character, as seen in Sonichu fighting 4centgarbage.com in Sonichu issue 8, as well as the clear Sue tendencies of Reginald Sneasel. He returned from the time void at the end of Sonichu issue 9, giving all non-Chris characters approximately one issue to have the spotlight to themselves, during which they mostly talked about how they loved Chris and hoped he would return safely. That's about as unhinged as that. You know what? Just reading that, do any of you guys remember from like the reboot of Powerpuff Girls and how there was that one infamous episode that they introduced a character who was so like modeled after like one of the producers who was like let go, and all the girls were like inexplicably in love with him for some reason? I think that's what happened in that anyway. I don't know. The whole Powerpuff Girls reboot is an absolute disaster of a disaster anyway. And it's something that should have just been left well alone. It's don't go looking for that either. That's you don't want to do that. Anyway, on the final page of the issue, Chris claimed that he would write himself out of the series permanently, giving his characters the opportunity to shine on their own. He went back on this promise, of course he would, almost the moment he made it. Issue number 10 is the most Chris-centric of the entire series. And remember, for those at all interested, issue 10 was the issue where Chris executed Alec Benson Leary, Sean, Mao, and Evan, and Chris proudly boasted himself as the hero, and then created Christian Love Day, 10 days after his real-life birthday. Following the theft of his medallions of Feo by Blanca, Chris immediately released a new comic adapting the theft into his canon and explaining that the true source of his power lay in his amethyst ring. Since the story was the necessary set after Chris escapes the time void, it was deemed a special preview of Sonichu issue 10, despite the fact that Chris had at that point not finished Sonichu issue 8 nor begun issue 9. So either, if you were going to go through that, one of two things would have to make sense. One, you could have explained this by means of a flashback. Sonichu explained this to perhaps Rosechu, and then they just sort of like inserted from that point onwards. B, you could say this was always the true intention, and then everybody was just forced to play along with it, and we just ignore the fact that actually any of this was said in the first place. Or C, we just go along with this explanation in only the hopes that actually his villains are that stupid enough to not think that there could have been any other source to Chris's powers, not just as the Mary Sue of all time, but probably would have taken away his striped shirt, thinking that was literal plot armor. I'm going to go on a limb here, ladies and gentlemen, and just say it's option C, if you will. Chris started Sonichu issue 11 in December of 2009 and completed Sonichu issue 10 in February of 2010. He produced a revised ending to issue number 10 in October of 2010. After a long, inspirationless lull, he began churning out new pages of Sonichu issue 11 in September of 2015. 5 whole years after basically leaving the old one. Hiatuses. Chris has regularly lost motivation to draw comics throughout the run of the series. Without a single job held for the past 18 years, he has all the time in the world and only lacks a drive to create. Now, to be fair, if Chris had a job, he could actually use his finances for better equipment, or if he had Patreon a lot sooner. I mean, I don't think Patreon was a thing all the way back in 2010. However, there were ways to raise money for this sort of thing if Chris was honestly that underwhelmed by the idea of drawing things anyway. I mean, let's think about this, ladies and gentlemen. If nobody donated me to my Patreon and all that about all the stuff that I did, I would still continue with it anyway, because you know what? I get a kick out of this anyway, and it's always fun to delve, go between the lines of this sort of thing. Not only as somebody who writes basically as something of a second job, but also for the fact that you can always learn from what goes on around you, and just from my extensive library and stuff like that, you'll always be able to know what you think works for you and what doesn't work for you and all that fun stuff. If Chris actually had any outlets for investing time into his work, then that might change, but is it because Chris doesn't want to, or Chris just would not know where to begin? Along with the abandonment of the Wikipedia in 2010, Sonichu issue 11 was put on hiatus later that year. Chris claimed that the trolls drained his creativity and scared him away from drawing any more Sonichu. And by the way, this is Chris in 2010 on his hiatus from Sonichu issue 11. I have not ended Sonichu. I only lost inspiration to draw, thanks to the people online. After 5 years of Chris sporadically mentioning the possibility of continuing the comic, on the 4th of September 2015, he finally added new content to Sonichu issue 11. New pages were added to Sonichu issue 11 that day. He said the new pages would be added maybe every other week. 27 pages were uploaded in 2015, but these updates were not to last. No pages were uploaded in 2016. Chris claimed that ADD and dementia were responsible. How could Chris have... Okay, is that true? Did Chris really claim he had dementia? Because Chris Doopy Doo... Okay, that might make more sense because... But really? To dementia? Does Chris even, like, have an idea about, like, how that even works? And Chris... And by the way, bear in mind, where was it? Dementia. So, where was this? Okay, so, like, 2017 is when, you know, the fallout between him and Doopy Doover happened. So, Chris would have been 35. Chris, you did not have dementia at 35. I'm sorry, but evidence to the contrary would suggest otherwise. No, Chris. In June 2017, Chris began making regular updates to the comic again, completing Sonichu issue 11 later that month, and Sonichu issue 12 in October. Chris announced that Sonichu issue 13 would be an unofficial crossover with Planet Dolan, but was scrapped after a falling out with Doopy Doover. In its place, Chris announced issue 12-9. 12-9 would be based around My Little Pony and feature a new self-insert of his, revolving almost entirely around ponies, which, if you're a fan of ponies, then more power to you. But if you're not, it's probably not the comic for you. Partway through the development of 12-9, Chris's work on the comic broke down. Before 12-9 had been complete, Chris began working on Sonichu 14, which was to return to the normal Sonichu setting. He soon spilled paint on the first few unfinished pages and sold them on eBay for a quick buck, presumably scrapping his work once again. Chris apparently still intended to complete issue 14. As he announced issue 15, the comic was intended as a remake/reboot of the earlier issues. This was derailed after Chris found the fan comic Rose Chew Story, which he began to plagiarize instead of making an original story for issue 15. Way to go, Chris. Was the trolls is to blame for that point as well, Chris? You know, that the fact that story existed, or was it just because you couldn't give a shit? Is that which one is it, Chris? Because it can't be both. Sonichu 15 was put on hold when communication with the Idea Guys began. These trolls made Chris illustrate their own narrative, which heavily focused on the politically incorrect retcons and generally horrible, unfunny things. Several pages were leaked in January of 2018 by Kiwi Farms users in contact with the Idea Guys, Joshua Moon and Stephen Boyd. Several pages were leaked in January. Okay, so after months without updates, Chris revealed in May 2018 that he had continued on work on issue 16, but was hesitant to release the nearly finished comic now that he had realized the Idea Guys had such an influence on it. Sonichu issue 16 was sent to Patreon supporters in fall of that year. On the 26th of June 2019, Chris uploaded 8 new pages for a new issue of Sonichu designed to be a sequel to issue 16. 2 days later, in a Patreon post, he would renumber issues 14, 15, and 16. Sonichu issue 14 would be moved to 16. Issue 16 would be renamed The Awakening of a CPU, aka The Idea Guy Corruptions, later renamed to issue 13. And the new issue would be numbered to issue 14. Oh god, I got a headache. Just think. Okay, hang on. So the pages he did in June would be the sequel to issue 16. They wouldn't be called 17. Issue 16 would be later renamed to 13, which would be the sequel to 12-9, and the new issues would be named to 4. Okay. I know there's like a gallery of pictures and that coming up and stuff like that. So we might take a look at those, but my brain hurts. Sonichu issue 17 was later revealed to exist, but only its cover had been seen. It appears to be influenced by the idea guys. Issues 14, 15, 16, and 17 are incomplete, and Chris has not updated any of them for around 2 years as of 2021. On the 11th of September 2020, when asked what he felt were the best Sonichu issues, he would reply with, in no particular order, issue 0, issue 12-9, and issue 15, all of which are origin stories for a self-insert character. Probably because Chris had no idea how he could go any further with any of them. That's probably the only reason why. I have no other reason to suspect this isn't the case otherwise, but what do I know? Maybe it isn't. Who knows? I don't know, or probably don't even care either way. Hello and welcome back again. So I had to take a little bit of a break because talking for like very nearly 40 minutes is completely, it's completely fucked up my throat. So that's again, okay, back again. Currently, it's a good place to let off if you ask me. Like all people, Chris was at his most productive when he was motivated. Yes, absolutely. The unfortunate truth is that much of Chris's motivation in early years came from trolls and being trolled himself. He has created hundreds of videos under the influence of trolls. The same could be said for the Sonichu comics. While Chris claims that the stress from the trolls prevented him from writing comics, the opposite is likely true. Sonichu issues 8 through 10 were all created during the classic trolling era, and they happen to be some of the longest comics Chris has ever made, each one around 100 pages long, compared to the usual 50 or so page length for Sonichu comics. After those, Sonichu issue 11 was finished 8 years after it was started. Finished 8 years after it was started? That's pretty bad. With no content in it relating to trolls. Much of the content in issue 12-9 is inspired by Jessica Quinn and the Idea Guys, who ostensibly began their mind games with Chris in order to get him to work on his comic more frequently, all of whom are trolls. The Idea Guys were even able to force an entire issue out of Chris on their own, due in no small part to their emotional manipulation and extortion of him. The only outlier of a comic post-classic trolling era is Sonichu issue 12, which was finished in a half a year and had nothing to do with trolls. Chris's motivation to create issue 12 stemmed from the burgeoning relationship with the LGBT community. That's actually something I've always probably maybe wanted to ask is, what is their opinion on Chris? What is the LGBT community have they ever had like a thorough opinion on Chris about where they think he stands in their community? Because I know opinions of Chris are not good. They are Chris might have some of the worst PR in history. But what about asking a larger audience? We'll see how that works out. Or even amongst those a member of the LGBT community who know of Chris and follow Chris. What do they make of the whole ordeal? I mean, I have some very, very strong words against Chris anyway, but yeah, well, that's just, you know what I mean. Simply put, Chris had no real reason to be writing and illustrating new Sonichu comics, which quite bluntly have always been an exercise in boosting his self-esteem rather than an exercise in creating a coherent narrative for his own characters. The relative innocence of the original Sonichu comics before the trolling sagas began has long since been lost, and Chris's has been genuinely been less productive on a creative level than since the ousting of the idea guys. A lack of long-term relationships has left Chris's motivation from art stagnant. While his delusions festered, while it was not impossible for Chris to complete any of his unfinished Sonichu comics, it was unlikely he would do so without making a change in his life. And anyone that, though that they should be that change in his life, would quickly learn that trolling Chris is a bad idea. Well, yes. Yeah, basically. Following Chris's arrest and pending trial for his incest charges, it seems highly unlikely that the comic will continue under Chris. Even presuming that he gets out of jail. He did, unfortunately. The fact that he's virtually unemployable, well, now he is, and can no longer make money off his platforms like Patreon, although he does make money from live streams, but not that that's going to make him do any more live streams or, continue on his comic, which would be the only way he could ensure a stream of income for himself. The number of people willing to financially support Chris has also decreased considerably in light of what he's done. Even if he could find a platform that could financially support him, they're called his White Knights and his trolls, it seems that the days of zapping to the extreme have come to a close for good. Although with that in mind, there's nothing to stop the true and loyal fan base Weens from creating fan continuations or other fan works of their own. They were called Guru, which began all the way back in 2009, but sort of just only really made by low effort trolls as opposed to anything else. Now, again, sort of another reason why I need to take a little bit of a pause is to explain the official canon of Sonichu, because this is where things get really, really confusing. So, if you are a respectable writer or those who've had experience about learning how to properly structure a narrative for something like Sonichu, if you've been experienced or a veteran in this in any way, shape, or form, look away now, because I wish I could be making any of this up. So, here we go. Okay, so, Episode 1, Sonichu's Origin. Plot summary. Sonichu and Rosechu are created by the Chaotic Rainbow. Kel adepts Rosechu. This is also the first appearance of Christian Western Chandler Sonichu, Sonic the Hedgehog, Kel, and Rosechu, and the only appearance of Perfect Chaos, which is literally just the Perfect Chaos monster from the ending of Sonic Adventure 1. Why it's never been mentioned again after this is a good point. Episode 2, Sonichu in Genesis of the Love Hogs. Sonichu, hungry and lonesome, follows Rosechu home to Kel. They fall in love. Episode 3, Sonichu vs. Nate Cirque. Well, Cirque, it's probably been changed. Sonichu and Rosechu go shopping. Nate Cirque tries to kidnap Rosechu, but Sonichu fights off his Zapdos and rescues Rosechu. Mayor Chris congratulates him, which is also the first appearance of Red Knock Natsu Nate Cirque. So, those are like the main stories of like the first issue, but then we get this. Classic Sonichu strips. Random stupid stories with Sonichu. First appearance of Black Sonichu, otherwise known as Blake, Jerkops, and Berry Willy Walsh. This is also the only appearances of Metonic, Vamprosa, and Barbara Chandler. And then they get also the sub-episode, which was connected to the first issue, but it's not canon to anything else. It's just a side story. Christian Chandler in Jerkop Jerkop-tastrophe. Chris is called out by a mana jerk and transforms into Chris and Sonichu to fight them off and the Jerkops off. Basically, it was an incident that probably Chris was 100% responsible for, and Chris thinks that they are in the wrong and he beats them up. That's basically what you need to know. So, that's the first issue. Okay, so that's issue 0. This is issue 1. And also, by the way, for those who care, began 3rd of January 2004, and it was completed 14 months later. And continuously here, Sonichu issue 1. Episode 4. Black Sonichu in Darkness, Speed, and Lightning. The origin of Blake. This is the first appearance of Dr. Robotnik, Giovanni, and Bill the Scientist. Episode 5. Sonichu in Informal Meeting. Blake kidnaps Rosechu, Sonic and Sonichu run into each other and then team up. Episode 6. Sonic and Sonichu Black Metal Combat. Sonic and Sonichu fight Robotnik's latest creation, and it's also the only appearance of Metal Sonichu. Sub-episode 2. Christian Chandler in The Rise and Fall of My Heart, the comic version of Chris's encounter with Hannah, and it's the only appearance of Hannah. This was also began on the 31st of March, and it was completed just under 3 weeks later, so fair enough for Chris. He certainly stepped up the mark here. Again, 14 months for just, at most, 5 little episodes. Then Sonichu issue 2, which is the third comic in the series. Episode 7, Sonichu in Ancient Prophecy. Chris takes over the story as his Sonichu medallion unleashes the power of the Ancient Prophecy. This is also the first appearance of Sarah Hammer, Wes Isley, and the ancient leader of the Cherokee clan. It's also the only appearance of the Keeper of the Destiny Cave. Episode 8, Christian Chandler in Chaos and Serenity. The 3 empowered hedgehogs meet and fight. It's also the first appearance of Wesley Sonichu and Sarah Rosechew. Episode 9, Chris, Chan, Samara, and Wesley in The Evil That Stomped Quickville. Samara breaks up with Wes Isley as Slowwheel the Witch makes her first big attack on Quickville. It's also the first appearance of Count Graduan. And for those who don't know who Count Graduan is, it is essentially Chris's manifestation of the shambolic display he put on at his high school graduation. Sub-episode 3, Christian, Chandler, and Sonichu in Witch Confront. Chris and Sonichu confronts the Wheel. Why exactly this is a sub-episode is a little bit questionable, because this seems more canon to the official narrative. And by the way, this began the 24th of April 2005, and it was completed in less than 2 weeks. Then we get issue 3, episode 10, Sonichu Babies. And this is the origins of the Chaotic Combo, which is the first appearance of Wild, Bubbles, Magi-chan, Angelica, Punchy, Sonny, and Rosie. Shinobe, and is also the only appearance of Maipoe and the boulder dropping whale. Okay, episode 11, the Chaotic Combo in When Hedgehogs Meet. This is when Blake steals the Master Sunstone and the Chaotic Combo unite, and it's also the first appearance of Flame the Sunbird. Whether or not, I've never once remembered if Flame ever appeared at all after this, but we'll wait and see. Sub-episode 4, Christian Chandler in Mac Attack. Chris is attacked in the MCDville by 2 Mana Jerks. This is also the first appearance of B Mana Jerk, Married Senior Comic, WM Mana Jerk, and Dark Bind Sonichu. Oh, and by the way, this is also the only appearance of Super Chris Chan Sonichu. Happy? Anyway, so this is where things get confusing, because we don't actually return to the narrative, well, for a while, because remember, this began the 20th of June 2005, and it was completed at some point, well, 21st of February 2006, so we're talking 8 months later here he did to finish this. And bear in mind, when I say finish, I should also mean barely looks like he got started, if that's the art on display. But whatever, I think his art it speaks for himself. That's the best way I could put that. So, okay, so we're up to issue 4, which is the 5th comic in the series. But what you'll notice is that this comprises entirely of sub-episodes. So, here's the thing. Christian Chandler in Jerkout Catastrophe, which is a reprint of Sonichu from Sonichu issue 0. Then you get The Rise and Fall of My Heart, which is the reprint in issue 1. And then basically up to sub-episode 4, these are all just reprints of things we've already seen. So not only is Chris trying to use like television tropes in his comics, he's also using some of the worst tropes you could possibly do, and that is a clip show. Do you know the reason why you've never seen a clip show in TV for over 10 years is because people caught on very, very quickly that nobody wants to see things they've seen millions of times before. Also, anybody could just go onto YouTube and find the best clips of the show anyway, and you don't have to listen to the producers telling you what you think the best parts of the show are. So that's why basically we don't have clip shows on television anymore. It's also for the same reason you don't really have this either, because it serves no purpose. because it's things we've already seen. However, then of course you get sub-episode 5, which is Christian Chandler in Mac Attack Part 2. Crystal appears to save the day as the WM manager attacks. It's also the first appearance of what's meant to be Crystal, Chris's in-canon sister, and WM manager, and it's also the last appearance of the ancient leader of the Cherokee clan. So glad he was introduced into this, because I would have almost completely forgot about him faster than Flame the Sunbird. Meanwhile, you get sub-episode 6, which is Christian Chandler's Backyard Safari, which gives Chris and us an inside look at the Jerkops, which is also the first appearance of Scott Palazzo, which I don't even know who that's meant to be either. Christian Chandler in Off Target. Bagat arrives to attack Chris, and the Crackter, you may as well say Crack Dealer if that's what they were going for. And then finally, sub-episode 8. Chris Chandler in Off Target Part 2. Chris is taken captive but rescued by Crystal. That's all you need to know. And remember, half of the comic is just things we've seen already. Basically, an actual half of it's just a reprint. Now, back to the main timeline in issue 5. Episode 12. Christian Chandler in My Best Friend's Cherokean Wedding. Chris attends Sarah Hammer's wedding, which is spoiled by Wesley Sonichu. Chris, with the aid of Megan Schroeder, saves the day. It's also the first appearance of Megagi La Skunk, and the only appearance of William Spicer and Sailor Megtoon. So glad that they were brought into this, because, again, you would have thought otherwise. Oh, and by the way, the only other thing to possibly talk about is that this only took only about 5 months to complete, but there is some question as to whether or not that's a little bit of an accuracy disclaimer more than anything. Anyway, episode 13, Shattered Hearts and Entrapment. Sloweo initiates an attack on Quickville, leading to Crystal getting trapped in the mirror, and also the first appearance of DJ Jamster Sonichu. And yeah, that's literally all you need to know for Sonichu issue 5, as this one only took roughly about 2 months to complete. So I'm going to say 7 weeks, just for the sake of accuracy. Now we move on to issue 7, episode 12 and a half. Why this just was not called, oh, well, this might be leading to a thing about Chris, unlucky numbers and stuff like that, but whatever. One lucky dog. Chris's dog Paddy is transported to Quickville and becomes an anthropomorphic dog with magical powers. It's also the first appearance of Paddy Chan and Addison Amber. Why on earth Chris's dog Paddy... It only took Chris nearly 7 issues into this to actually bother to reference his dog at all is interesting. Episode 14. Evil is afoot. Chris and the Chaotic Combo began their quest for the Sonichu Balls as Rednog makes his first appearance. And it's also the first appearance of Bionic the Hedgehog. And again, we're talking a period of roughly about 8 months just to do basically 2 episodes. Now we move on to issue 7, episode 15. Sonichu, Magi-chan, and Christian in Time for a Ball. Chris learns the location of one of the Sonichu balls and goes to get it. The only appearance of a character named Sammy, apparently. And again, you're wondering how long this took him, over a year to complete. Well, he didn't spend half the time just doing this, but then again, this is also when troll interferences began, so that might be... This is where the timestamps for his comics really do begin to go on a bit. Episode 16. Quick and Sonichu in the Time Hogs. Chris and Sonichu retrieve a Sonichu ball, only for Chris to be lost in the time void. And then, for some reason, tune in every day to station KCWC for everything. DJ Jamster interviews Blanca and Gigliami, the first appearance of Gigliami and Blanca, and the only appearance of Robert Simmons V. Okay, I almost forgot who that was for a minute. And yeah, that's basically what you need to know there. Now, issue number 8, episode 17, Race Against the Garbage. After sex, and yes, this is suddenly where Chris is, there's a spontaneous rise in adult content arises in a lot of these. After sex, Sonichu and Rosechu learn about 4centgarbage.com and go to confront Jason Kendrick Howe over his work. They get a Sonichu ball for their troubles. And it's also the first appearance of Jason Kendrick Howe and the Incredible Lioness, which is basically Rosechu if she encountered, Rage of the Titans. And then episode 18, Spring Break 2008. Sylvana makes a move as Jigliami warns the others of her plans, and they get another Sonichu ball. It's also the first appearance of Zapina, Simone LaRochechu, and Sylvana, and the last appearance of Jigliami and Blanca, and the only appearance of a character called a Yawning Squirtle. Also, yeah, for those who are unfortunate enough to remember this is also when Chris basically stole a character named Simola from Evan Christopher George. I think it was Evan anyway, but yeah, so this sort of also it was just something that was already stolen anyway, so there you are. Glad we needed to clear that up. Also, speaking of clearing things up, it began on the 20th of August 2008, completed the 1st of January 2009, and then revised later 10 years later. So, if you thought what happened in issue 4, where half the issue was just revisions, this is where Chris just does revises for all of them. Now we move into issue 9. Episode 19, Datehead, even though the idea sounds dated. Thrill to the wonder that is Chris's dating education classes, and the first appearance of Reginald Sneasel, Layla, and Rita Jackaras, and of course the only appearance of Miss Jackaras. Okay. Episode 20, Quick Defense. The PVCC mounts a massive attack on Quickville. Chris is later pulled, the private villa of corrupted citizens. Chris is later pulled out of the Time Void, and is the first appearance of the Samurai Pizza Bots and the Power Rangers, and the only appearance of Billy Mays, who temporarily was the mayor of Quickville because of the trolls. Oh, and by the way, yes, this begun on the 1st of December 2008 and completed over a year later, 53 weeks to be exact. Then we move into issue 10, and which comprises of of just one whole episode, episode 21. Chris Chan in Director Amenities. Chris rains holy hell on all his enemies. Even though he claims all of his enemies, this is also the first appearance of such enemies like Clyde Cash, Jack Thaddeus, other characters like Lovely Weather, Asperchew, the chaotic combo of Asperchews, Meadow Asperchew, the Asperpedia 4, and Sandy Rosechew. It also features the deaths of Red Nalk, Jason Kendrick Howe, Asperchew, Clyde Cash, Jack Thaddeus, the chaotic combo, Asperchew, Meadow Asperchew, the Asperpedia 4, Slow Wheel the Witch, homosexuality and asexuality, and Simola Rosechew. And this began on the 15th of September 2008, completed by the 25th of February of 2010, so we're talking basically a year and a half later, and revised both in 2010 because of Jackie, and 2015, when he needed to somehow make this available to sell on Etsy. And by the way, also, if you're wondering why the cover for this looks so different, it was because it was done by fictitious Scowpal Panda Halo. Have we got that? Okay, we got that. Now we move into Sonichu issue 11. A Sonichu Christmas. Christmas is coming, and Sonichu, Rosechu, and their children faff about the place doing nothing of importance. Sarah befriends Kevin, a Peanuts-type character. Robbie and Sonichu help a homeless woman. Simona Rosechu miraculously recovers from her execution. Somehow. This is apparently episode 22, but it is not numbered as such. First appearance of Kevin Stephanie, and the resurrection of Simona Rosechu. Episode 23. Simonachu and Banana Funkle. Sonichu finds a new Pokemon and Punchy adopts it, causing Layla to leave him. The first appearance of the Bananasaurus. Fantastic. Episode 24, Part 1. The Clip Show. Catching Up. Sonic and Sonichu catch up at the mall. Return of Sonic. First appearance of Ferreira and Dogson. Apparently, a clip show needed to be 2 parts. I didn't even know that was somehow possible. And by the way, this is the one that also took the longest amount of time because Chris just couldn't be bothered to do it. Because it began on the 13th of August 2009 and completed the 30th of June 2017. So, a while. Just under 8 years for him to just get around to finally making this. Issue 12, Episode 25, To Be or Not a Tongo. Robbie Sonny comes to terms with her gender identity. And apparently this, again, I say part 1 because goodness knows if this catches up any other point. Oh wait, it does. Hang on. Episode 26, Prideful, the first Quickville Pride Festival. Episode 24, Part 2, The Clip Show continued. Sonic and Sonichu catch up at the mall. What is the point of doing clip shows anyway when literally we know what happens? We've read the comics. And also for the case for this one, issue 12 began on the 21st of May 2017 and completed the 16th of October 2017. So a bit of a return to form in terms of spaces, so somewhere between 3 to 4 months, but well, this is where things get complicated again. Sonichu issue 12-9. Brackets. Chris abandons his traditional habit of dividing his comics into episodes in this and all future issues. So, whether you want to call this issue 25 or not is entirely of your own choice. And the origin story of Nightstar and how she learned to traverse dimensions, visiting Quickville, and getting to know Christine. This also began the 25th of August 2017 and completed just under a year later. Well, we'll say 11 months because, well, yeah. And of course, the big one. Issue 13, The Awakening of a CPU, also known as the Idea Guy Corruptions. And for those who don't know the story as to what this is really about, this is how John Yamada came to influence Chris. Really an incoherent series of plot threads involving material from existing fictional universes and real-world politics to interest the Idea Guys. It began on the 1st of November 2017 and completed the 3rd of August 2018, so a period of about 8 months, which is interesting because The Awakening of a CPO is so text-heavy, you're wondering why Chris didn't just decide to make it into a little mini book, if you will. Because this is unlike any other Sonichu issue you've found as of yet. However, I was wrong, because Sonichu issue 14 is the second book of The Awakening of a CPU, and the events leading up to the dimensional merge, which began on the 26th of June 2019 and has yet to be completed. I don't know if Chris even thinks about colouring this whatsoever, or did Chris not think about getting a fresh sheet of paper or anywhere to properly store these pages. We know he restores a lot of the original ones, but not this one in any case. Issue 15, which began on the 16th of October 2017. And is the retelling of issue 0. Most of the content was plagiarized from Rose Chew's story, a fan comic, and is yet to be completed. Despite the fact that Chris probably had the least amount of work to do, it's still unfinished. Nearly 7 years later. Then we get issue 16, and yeah, you're getting the idea in this. And is this what happened here, by the way? I honestly couldn't tell you. Began the 30th of May 2017 and has seemingly been abandoned. Count Graduon the Mighty Warrior. Count Graduon's origin story. Chris drew 3 pages and then accidentally spilled paint on it. He sold the damaged pages on eBay. And then Sonichu issue 17, which began on the 1st of April 2018 and is yet to be completed. And there are no issues on it, or any info whatsoever. and so on, and so on, and so on. You know, if Chris ever at any point ever considered doing any more issues of this, you could probably be assured that they just would never be released, never be finished. I know he probably won't ever be able to sell on Patreon again, but he couldn't even go to... I don't even think Gumroad would even accept this. That's what I think. Moreover, there are some special editions that do need explaining. These special issues were one-offs intended for specific audiences, but subsequently obtained by trolls and publicly released. So, Sonichu Special Issue 1, Quick holding out for a hero. Chris rescues Ivy, a troll, from the clutches of Cly, and it's the first appearances of Ivy, seen here, and Clyde Cash. Sonichu Special Issue 2, The Wedding Comic, the fail-tastic union of Chris and Ivy. This is also the only appearance of Spas the Cat, Canino Houndwolf, Lilith, Rachel, not saying that, and the Unnamed Priest. Then Special 3, which is also known as the Giant Penis Comic, the even more fail-tastic honeymoon of Chris and Ivy, which is also the very last appearance of Ivy and Officer Kino. Special 4, also known as the Gun Comic. Ian Brandon Anderson rescues Casey from Quick Chan Sonichu Quick, though it's unclear why Casey needs to be rescued if she's in a consensual relationship with Liquid Chris, shoots Liquid in the shins, and then makes out with Casey. It's also the only appearances of Casey, Casey's mom, Matthew Devoria, and Liquid Chris. Special Issue 5, the Guard Dogs Comic. Chris sends the Amethyst Ring to the captain, and it's also, well, the captain is a well-known member of Kiwi Farms, and he's sort of been one of the main people to keep Chris safe from the consequences of the idea guys and more malicious trolls who extorted Chris for thousands of dollars and ridiculous ideas. Special number 6, the Soft Exile Comic. Magi-chan talks to Dr. Wolf, a creator of the TF2 analysis show, about Chris being blocked on Twitter by several high-profile creators from the My Little Pony Brony fandom, in particular members of TF2 analysis, and it's also the first appearance of Dr. Wolf. And then finally, Sonichu Special Issue 7, also known as the Slime Comic. Chris's true and honest rendition of Ben Saint's promotional comic, and it's also the only appearances of Phantom Horn and Strawberry Milk. What any of these have anything to do whatsoever in terms of things you need to factor into the comics, I honestly couldn't tell you. I also wouldn't even know how, if it wasn't even the case of Chris suffering from collective burnout, but you know, when you think about it, if Chris literally had stuck to his roots and just ignored the trolls entirely and just kept on working, then you know what? He might have actually not only have maybe possibly have reached 50 comics by this point, but probably could have made more money and probably even might have learned a few things along the way. But no, it didn't turn out to be, now did it? Oh dear. And now we're back. Good times. I'm sorry if I'll make sure to try and do this properly so I don't have to do this in in 3 parts each time. But yeah, this is the only way I'm able to actually do this so we can get things on the right foot. So again, approved fan fictions. And this is also yet to be complete due to stress. And here's a professional tip. We advise that you don't make any comics of your own to implement in Chris's canon. It makes you look stupid as Chris when he did it alone. That's true. Don't even... Yeah, if you're thinking about the idea, don't. It's probably for the best. On the 17th of December 2019, Chris uploaded a complete set of the Sonichu series, including comics 0 to 13 of the main series, but also 2 fanfic comics that he was officially endorsed to Quickville Shopping. Not being derived from his own genius, they are a step below true and honest Sonichu canon. You know, for all that's worth. Nevertheless, he has sanctioned them as mostly true to his vision, and is exploiting these fruits of others' labours financially. Now, I do happen to know that Rose Chu's story, I think was, oh yeah, here we go. Anyway, here we go. Rose Chu's story. Designed by Trickle Chew, originally a Kiwi Farms project to redeem as much possible from Chris's lackluster writing by focusing on the side character Rose Chew. I do happen to know that this, isn't like Trickle Chew meant to be like, Dylan Thomas's girlfriend or something like that? For those who don't know, Dylan Thomas used to be a Sonichu, a Chris Chan YouTuber who mostly talked about Chris Chan in this sort of style, but I think he sort of like retired from the whole project about about 2 years ago, I think. Anyway, moving on. Also, we get the Brian Frogboy one called Chris Chan, a prequel comic. Created by Brian Frogboy and written as a deconstruction of Chris's life, told from Chris's point of view. So, true and honest, but biased nonetheless. Marketing. In his August 2009 resume, Chris stated that his dream was to get me paper published with a comic book company like Archie, Marvel, DC, or Dark Horse Comics. He couldn't, again, this is probably why he never even thought about applying, let alone written another resume in his life, because get me paper published. I'm assuming he said get my paper published. It still doesn't make too much sense either way, but, you know, small steps, so like 1 out of 10, I suppose. He finally made this happen, sort of, in September of 2015, when he discovered Lulu.com and put a bound of copy of Sonichu number 0 for the sale for $10. A print version of book 1 appeared the following month. Although his Lulu account disappeared from public view after about a week, he continued to offer the books, autographed upon request, on Etsy. He made routine updates on Facebook. A recipient of the first issue provided a review. The cover is pixelated and shitty. Chris really obviously just stretched out whatever resized image he happened to have on his PC at the time, rather than rescan the original or do anything that required any effort. The spine is completely fucked up, and spills over onto the back of the book, making it totally useless. The bottom half of the text can't be viewed from the side. If by some shitty reason you ever wanted to buy multiple future issues to put on your shelf, you'd never be able to tell which one is which. I don't know if this is because he just copy-pasted a book spine he assumed would work, or if he really underestimated how big the book would be. Probably both. The result is that the cover is one of the worst things in comic history. It honestly is so poorly done and so low quality that if Chris wasn't saying it was his, I would assume this was a troll attempt to make him look bad. Way to go, Chris. The back cover is significantly less pixelated, but still looks like garbage because it is. Of course, drawn all in markers and pen by Chris. The paper used is matte and looks like the lowest quality / cheapest option he could get it printed on. Someone else mentioned it looks like draft quality and that pictures make it better. It seriously is so ugly and the resolution so low, it looks like a test page, and I can't even capture how shitty it is on camera. I purchased comics from Lulu before, and they weren't nearly this bad, so there must be a varying levels of publishing quality, or Lulu themselves has dropped in quality significantly. It's been years, and Chris picked the worst. So it's exactly what you expect. Low quality and no effort by Chris other than uploading it. He didn't even check to see if things fit on the cover. Probably because he never thought it did, because again, if it meant making a quick buck, that was probably all that mattered to Chris anyway. Yeah, so what were you... Although, again, since you're able to basically view all the comics on the internet anyway, what was even the point in buying them? As advertised on Etsy. Printed and autographed Sonichu Issue 0 comic book. $10. Overview. Handmade item. Materials, paper and ink. Made to order. Ships worldwide from Ruckersville, Virginia. Item details. This is a pre-order of a printed version of my first Sonichu comic book Issue 0. It will be in comic book size and paper format. The reverse price is an estimate, and it also allows room for the print set of Book 1, which follows Book 0. See the hand-drawn beginnings of Sonichu and Rosechu, as well as their classic and romantic coming together and meet, the meeting and battle against Natesurk, a few past drawn classic comic strips, and the first of a few sub-episodes featuring the artist/author years before finding herself. Okay. Feeling lost and searching for the true love from friendship intended, but finds constant troubles from the past goons of her arch nemesis, Count Graduon, with holstered help from the witch Slowio Ryam. Chris, you're going a little bit in depth on the details. Just, if I was a customer, Chris, just tell me exactly what I'm getting, what it's about, in the most truncated version and less convoluted manner that you can manage, Chris. That's all I'm interested in. Oh god, there's more. Of which Sega is still quoted for their Sonic characters, but I have my own personal copyright on Sonichu, Rosechu, and everything else therein. Which doesn't work anyway, but okay. Also, any names or persons illustrated in any of the Sonichu comics, except that of my own, that may seem similar to anyone in real life or wherever else are purely coincidental or otherwise parodic. Not fictional, bear in mind. He never mentions that they're fictional. And not canon to their source, stories, and or formats. Also, the legal page and the corner author note on the front will be updated to respectively match my current name and other related items. The contents of this and the other completed and future books have been edited to allow the age range to be for TV Y7 and above, even though, again, that's for a television program and it's not meant for the age approval rating when it comes to comic books. I mean, literally, you know what? Forget it. I'll just do it myself. Where's my issue of Morning Glories? Okay, so it's right underneath Demon in a Bottle, Armor Wars, and Days of Future Past. But again, I don't quite remember. Yeah, okay. So what I want to show you guys is that this is my issue of the first volume of Morning Glories. Was this by Image Comics? I'm pretty sure this is by Image Comics. Yes, it is. And usually, I'll show you where you can find the age approval rating, because it should be very clearly laid out anyway. Also, this is how you would do an item description, or just say what the story is. I don't really care about what your backstory is or what the stories are between the artists and, the writers. But also, you can see right there, rated M for mature. Which, again, rated M is supposed to be specifically just to be about, tell us about, what the age rating is. And to be fair, well, okay, maybe I should, pull back, because maybe TVY7 is sort of what it was intended for. I'm actually trying to remind myself exactly what even, Morning Glories was even about, but I'm sure I'll find out if I pick it up again. I mean, there's all sorts of other things, like, blue is the warmest color, or Giant Days. And a lot of them are just, Chris, did you ever once think about, picking up a comic book or a graphic novel and just sort of working under the assumption about, of the one size fits all, so it would be easier to understand how to do this properly? I mean, it took me, a 5 seconds to reach up, grab my copy of Morning Glories Volume 1, and start working from there. It will take me a week or two to put together the pages into the publishing site's template size and uploading them there. And then it will take up to another 4 weeks for them to print and ship the books to me, so I can autograph them and send each of them to each person who will have reserved a copy. Therefore, the estimated wait time for the books for completion will be as late as the end of October this year. You're keeping quite a lot of people waiting there, Chris, but again, maybe this was the only way to do it, but there's got to be a simpler way still, I think. Also, please do continue to show me your support by buying a medal, an amiibo figure, or donate towards my creation and peace of mind cause. So please, just failing these, give me your money. Thank you, and have a great and safe day. And again, this is going to illustrate how and this is, again, what it looks like. Look how bad this is. Never mind never mind that. It's just ugly as well. It's so pixelated. Again, how, you know what? Again, I know fine well Chris never thought about the idea of using things like Adobe Illustrator, but how hard could it be to have, like, restored these things to glory by using Illustrator? I reckon if I had the time and, well, effort, I probably still wouldn't do it, but I could probably just turn these things into new by using Illustrator. It might not be better, but it's gotta be something as well. Look at this. I mean, okay, this is slightly better, but again, I want to emphasize this once again. In the mountains and hordes of junk that Chris has in his room, let alone his house, he doesn't own something as basic as a ruler. I mean, look at that. Chris claims he has ADHD or whatever it is, but it didn't at all inspire him whatsoever to take that into any consideration while making all this. This looks like a really shoddy storyboard than an actual comic. On the 23rd of September, Chris edited the first paragraph of this description to read, "Please note, this book is now available from its matching listing on Lulu, only by ordering it through me. Will I have the chance to personally autograph your copy of the book for you? Otherwise, you may go to the listing on Lulu and order a physical copy for yourself there as well. My price here covers shipping from there to me and then to you. Thank you." So again, if you want to have it autographed, just wait longer and spend extra money. So not great value, not a great asset in my opinion. Okay. In his second week of October, however, his Lulu account went down and he had to change this again. "Please note, this is the only way to order the book. I have it printed through lulu.com. The listing there is only viewable to me. Anyhow, I still have the liberty to personally autograph your copy of the book for you. If you do not wish it to be autographed, please select the variation option of not autographed book. The advantage of having it autographed being I can order it from the printer and have it shipped to your address, but it won't be in a comic book sleeve. And each copy sent from me will be shipped in a plastic comic book sleeve with cardboard lining inside a large envelope. My price here covers shipping from me to you." Okay, thank you. I have absolutely no idea if Chris ever at any point made any sort of profit from this. Oh, and by the way, the description is... I'm sort of like skipping past this part because it's basically the same as issue 0, and it's probably the same for these as well. However, printed and autographed Sonichu issue 4 comic book plus rant against online dating. Main article, Sonichu issue 4. Chris veered into an off-topic rant on online dating in the description. Oh no. $15. Item details. Contains 96 pages recommended for people ages 7 and up. Bearing in mind, issue 4 is where half the entire comic is just a reprint of things we've already seen. In this special book, archived and retold are the past short adventures of the past Christian Weston Chandler, long before coming out as a lesbian trans woman during the days of his sweetheart search, of which were constantly thwarted by the Jerkoffs and Jane Cops, sent by the evil Count Graduan and Slewey Oriam. Their actions towards making true love and being sweethearts illegal and lost in the city of Quickville, followed by the state of Virginia, then the United States and the world. But the artist and creator and mayor of Quickville refuses to stand down and give up in finding the one woman who will be his one true sweetheart, seeded from the ground up. Chris, you want to fuck a plant? With good and honest face-to-face friendship, along with new short chapter segments to conclude the set of sub-episodes. Seriously though, meeting people online, communicating for weeks to months, even years, before ever meeting face-to-face in person, which is vital and required for any true and real friendship and relationship. That is plain no good whatever happened to the days of everyone actually being friendly towards one another in the towns and cities, even in this world? Why do we have to fear each other for the fear and unknown that was stemmed from wars, attacks, and bad people? OMFG! Are we all so bleeding paranoid that we are forced into a sense of pseudo-autism by remaining constantly with our faces looking at screens and monitors, with lack of real eye contact from initial in-person, face-to-face meetings at a bar, shopping mall, college, library, or coffee shop? Not only do I personally suck at meeting and communicating with people online, especially to establish honest and real and true relationships in the trials and errors that are not only more efficient and better without hiding behind screens and monitors. Sigh. But I remain constantly lonely and freaking shy from lack of women actually offering me their time of day or interest face to face, but I digress. Of which Sega is still quoted for their Sonic, okay, blah 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 blah. Also, please do continue to show me your support. Okay, please note this is the only way to order the book. Few things are needed to be commented here, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that if Chris literally, if there was any publication, if Chris put this on the back of any like graphic novel or comic book, they would have laughed him out. They would have shown him the door, because first of all, the random capitalizations, the fact that any other full word that is not capitalized just begins with a capital letter, because Chris seems to think that grammar or, punctuation is completely optional. And then there's the fact that he adds the freaking sigh. He is so accustomed to the idea of sighing, he has to always make sure everybody knows about this, as though we can literally they say you speak as you talk, or rather you write as you speak, but we don't need it to be this literal, if you ask me. But anyway, future plot lines. Over the years, Chris has dropped a few hints about specific plot lines. At one point, he stated, Metal Sonichu is not a secondary character. He will be making his return as a major villain after Book 11, possessed by the soul of Count Graduon. He later elaborated, Count Graduon will be the major villain beyond Sonichu Issue 10, possessing the metal Sonichu that crashed on the moon back in Book 1. The issue may move to Rule Quick. Chris has said that Darkbind and Zelina will be fighting Clawdorf with great sword and bow and arrow battles. There may also be a lack of great director intrusion. After Book 10, I will be making less appearances in the pages, as well as having a big mistake, because I had got carried away with the trials and tribulations in my life, real and online, that it completely messed me up. Since then, Crown Graduon and Metal Sonichu have only reappeared once in Sonichu Issue 12. Rule Quick has not been seen since Sonichu Issue 10, and Chris broke his promise to cut down on only his appearances in the comic with Sonichu Issue 13. And the only other thing to mention about, well, at some point I am going to be going over like the entirety of the comic series in itself, because to be honest, there's a lot of things to go over. But it just goes to show that, again, we talk about and then again, this is also not even going on things like, the characters, the locales, the nightmares that probably reduced in so many people. And again, this is also going to come into things like, again, the larger expansion about Chris's businesses and stuff like that. But the most important thing you need to know is that, how did we get there? Is that, remember, this was Chris's life's work. This is everything he pretty much ever stood for. This is Chris's gateway into fantasy. A final escape from his madness. His only real escape from reality. And problem is, ladies and gentlemen, is that over the years, we know fine well that Chris's fantasies is the only way he can enjoy reality. This is his only escape, and unfortunately his fantasy has escaped into the real world. And whether or not Chris ever brings Sonichu back to fruition or makes any other stories whatsoever, I'm not entirely sure if it's worth the trouble. I also don't think it would be worth investing any more time into learning about Sonichu outside of why it's so infamous and exactly what not to do. Because no word of a lie, ladies and gentlemen, again, this is just one of those things where it's only ever necessary just to show as an example of what not to do. So, with all that being said and done, this is where we have to pull out of the station, ladies and gentlemen, and it's time to get back on track. Hopefully somebody will come and pick up this enormous tablet at some point, but until someone does, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to pull out of the station once again. So, I thank each and every one of you who has stopped by and taken the ride with us as we explored Sonichu in relation to Chris Chan as far as the comic is concerned. Please make sure to leave all your thoughts and comments in the comment section down below. Let them know, because we want to post regular replies and updates to make our railway run smoother. Call me the Fat Controller, because we're in control here. And I cannot wait to talk to you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now. Keep it zapping.